Welcome to this presentation on James Dashner's gripping dystopian novel, The Maze Runner. In this summary, we'll delve into the mysterious world of the Glade, explore the challenges faced by Thomas and his fellow Gladers, and uncover the secrets of the ever-changing maze. Prepare to navigate the twists and turns of this thrilling story as we explore themes of survival, memory, and the need for answers. The exposition of Maze Runner is introduced with the protagonist and the plot written by Dashner by the name of Thomas. Initially, the book starts off with Thomas being brought to the maze through the box. The maze is separately different from a typical civilization, and readers are launched towards the conflict of the book after the Gladers are introduced and the setting of the Glades is described. The conflict includes Gladers living in the maze whose only goal is to escape these surroundings, as the maze hosts people with different characterizations such as the runners, the leaders, and the council. Each and every individual in the Gladers vividly remembers their past, suggesting they have been brainwashed before entering the maze. The overall setting is expressed as a scared environment because they experience abandonment, and this setting represents the sole aura of togetherness they share. Also, the only clash that is breaking them off from civilization is represented by a form of antagonists presenting themselves as malicious, dilapidated creatures that make shrill sounds, alluded to by Dashner as grievers. Altogether, the book primarily focuses on how to learn and adapt from the everlasting conundrum they have to face, which is represented by the maze. The rising action of Maze Runner starts up with being showcased on what happens when the runner of the maze. Runners are people given the superiority of surviving against the grievers and try to look for a doorway out of the maze. One of the runners, named Ben, has been infected by the grievers' attack, giving a sense on how dangerous of a threat the grievers are to the Gladers. Unfortunately, one of these monstrous creatures attacks Thomas as he attempts to get out for water. Later on, as they sacrifice Ben because of his infection, one of the leaders of the Gladers, Albi, sets out to be the runner in the absence of Ben. Albi turns out to get bit by the grievers, contemporarily feels wary. Minho, one of the key experienced runners, tries to retrieve the leader back before the maze closes for good. Thomas then becomes entangled in the Gladers' struggle for survival, including saving Albi from a griever sting, making him snap out of his suppressed state, ultimately facing off with Gally, who suspects him as the cause of the situation. As the rising action unfolds, the story leads to a series of events that includes the arrival of Teresa, the rediscovery of Albi's memory with the help of a griever venom tube which Thomas killed on the night with Minho, and a spontaneous nighttime griever attack that kills several Gladers' lives. Opinions. The conflict has developed as the main protagonist, Thomas, brought new challenges to the Gladers. Then there was such an attack from the grievers at night. The characteristics such as Gally has grew on to suspect Thomas's behavior and well-being to be correlated to how it has affected the Gladers as a whole. Others, such as New and Minnow, has grown an affinity towards the character that Thomas represents, and they support him and show no regret for Thomas being present with them. In fact, these lead characters, Gladers, actually see Thomas as one of them as a longtime friend after enduring haggard tasks with other Gladers. As a result, the reoccurrence of Albi's memory has made Gally's suspicion on Thomas to grow larger than it was, presenting an overwhelming disdain for the protagonist Thomas. This indirectly categorizes Gally as the supplemental protagonist of Maze Runner, and directly characterizes Chuck, Newt, and Minnow as a potential Gally standout, with Thomas being imminent, leading to a potential final standoff against Thomas vs. Gally, which I anticipated as the climax. After the events of surviving a night in the maze, Minnow takes Thomas to a room which I like to refer to as the runner's room. Minnow shows the map he has made as he has every inch of the maze. The climax of Maze Runner is ultimately held in the council. In the council, Gally expresses opinions on how Thomas should be exiled to the Grievers, while as Minnow expresses claims that Thomas is the only one with the guts to sacrifice his life for the greater good. That said, the Gladers needed more of his characteristic and proposed an idea for Thomas to be a runner alongside him. Ultimately, the conflict that has been decided was for Thomas to spend a day in the hole. Therefore, Thomas intentionally gets stung by a griever and feels stoic, therefore getting hit with a surge of memories and crucial information about the maze and its purpose, giving a disquieting feel to Thomas's mental state, which is referred to as nostalgia. This event is pivotal because it allows Gladers to understand the nature of the maze and Wicked's experiment, which they use to plan their escape. Additionally, Albi sacrificed to the Grievers to buy time for the others further escalates the tensions and highlights the stakes of their escape. The Gladers ultimately come to a standoff, which is Thomas versus Gally, representing the gist of the climax. Rising tension. This shows the antagonist development as the protagonist continues. Protagonist is Thomas. Thomas has been embroiled in the conflict of living up to the beings and manners of the Gladers, as shown in the quote by Gally that expresses, "You've been here 3 days, and I've been here 3 years." This evidence shows the tension of Thomas to live up to Gally's lofty and unrealistically unfair expectation. Apart from the constant trouble of Gally, Thomas is also put into a constant conflict with Wicked, who is the entity in the plot and has made their lives miserable. Thomas eagerly wants to get out as soon as he can and shown his curiosity towards the maze. Main antagonist is Gally. He is portrayed as a mysterious, rule-following Glader who distrusts Thomas and frequently clashes with him. While some people argue that he's not completely evil and he's just and his desire just to protect the Glade, he's undeniably the primary source for conflict for Thomas and the other Gladers in the first part of the book. Falling action. After surviving a long, scary night in the bogs, Thomas wakes up flushed, yet still intact, to a new day in the Glade. Gally shows up angry and upset, forcing Thomas to the edge of the maze as he is planning to give him the Grievers as a form of sacrifice, perjuring towards the imminent desire of Grievers. The mites of Grievers. Gally believes this will bring back order and safety, like when Albie was still in charge of the Gladers and all of them felt more secure. The supplemental protagonist tells everyone that during the changing, he saw Thomas and remembers him working with the creators, the people who built the maze. I'm sorry, just a quick correction. It's the supplemental antagonist that tells everyone that during the changing he saw Thomas and remembers him working with the creators, the people who built the maze. Wicked. Gally says Thomas is a spy and part of the reason they're trapped, placing all blame and accountability his way unfairly. Later, after Thomas and his Gladers escape the maze and find the creators, Gally returns unexpectedly, causing a strong sense of suspicion in the reader. To explain, he looks like he's not thinking clearly, along with the notion that someone else is controlling him. Without warning, he throws a knife at Thomas, but Chuck jumps in the way and is killed, leaving Thomas heartbroken and angry. Towards the end of this portion of the plot, characters begin to fully define themselves, expanding the impact the plot has on the reader, leading right into the resolution. The resolution of the Maze Runner was intense and filled with indifferent suspense. Thomas and the other Gladers finally found a way out of the maze after facing many stifling challenges. Challenges included Grievers, infected Gladers turning on the group, causing a legitimate threat, and confusing tests between each other, providing their navigating through an arduous struggle together. When they escaped, they were picked up by a group of people who said they were rebels trying to stop Wicked, the resistance group that had trapped them, to convince them of an option to endure and possibly eradicate their struggles. At first, it seemed like a happy ending because they were safe, fed, and no longer in the maze. Although everyone looked tired but also relieved and hopeful that their nightmare was over as they looked forward to a sense of normalcy. Yet and still, a secret note was discovered, and it said that the rescue might actually be part of another experiment. As a result of this development, this made the ending feel mysterious and a little scary, as if things weren't really over. Furthermore, it definitely seemed like there would be more books in the series because there were still so many questions that weren't answered. I felt both excited and worried. I was proud of the characters for surviving, but also nervous about what was going to happen next. The resolution didn't just give us full peace, but it made me really want to read the next book to find out the truth. How would you feel if a cliffhanger was obvious with the book of interest? Synopsis: The Maze Runner is a thrilling and mysterious story about a boy named Thomas who wakes up with no memory in a place called the Glade. The Glade is surrounded by a giant, ever-changing maze that traps Thomas and a group of boys who call themselves the Gladers. The boys don't know why they are there or how to escape, but they work together to explore the maze and solve a secret. Thomas, the primary protagonist, feels different from the others because he's curious and brave, and when he arrives on the scene in the exposition, things start to change. One part that really stood out to me is when Thomas anxiously says, "Wicked is good." This statement is important because it shows how Thomas begins to trust the organization that created the maze called Wicked. This is an entity that they proceed to endure and accept even though it seems scary and mysterious. This made me think about how sometimes in societies people have to trust others even when they don't fully understand their true intentions. This occurs especially in Adura's situation. I also liked how the story explores themes like friendship, courage, and never giving up, even when everything feels impossible. Overall, The Maze Runner is not just about escaping a maze, but about finding hope and working together to survive. Make me wonder how much we should trust people in power and what we would do if we were stuck in a situation where the rules kept changing. Conclusion: The Maze Runner explores the themes of survival, identity, and the resilience of the human spirit in the face of unknown challenges. Throughout the novel, Thomas's journey reflects the strength it takes to question authority and seek truth in a world built on lies. A central quote that captures this monumental transformation is, "If you ain't scared, you ain't human." This quote reminds us that trepidation is not weakness, but a part of being alive. The glade and the maze represent more just than physical barriers. They symbolize the confusion and isolation of growing up in a world without clear answers. As Thomas and the others navigate the maze, they must also navigate their own moral choices and fractured memories. The conflict between control and freedom, represented by Wicked's experiments, challenges the idea that there also is an additional theme of the plot that highlights sacrificing for the greater good. In the end, the characters emerge from immense exile, not with total clarity, but rather with strength to keep searching.